We're learning more about the death of actress Hayden Panettiere. Initially, it was reported she was alone with her boyfriend in an upscale apartment building when she had an apparent overdose and went into cardiac arrest. But we've obtained the police report that reveals there was someone with them when first responders arrived.
Hayden Panettiere's death is now an open investigation. Remember, originally they had announced that there was no foul play or suspicious activity suspected. We know that the DEA is now involved. Certainly this is linked to the bag of 9 different medications that Brian handed police officers saying that Hayden was taking.
A lot of people got deep in their feelings when they saw Solange's tribute to Hayden Panettiere, and the reaction online got intense fast. Many viewers felt there was something deeper behind those words, especially after looking back at what Hayden had been expressing just 3 months earlier. For some people, the timing and emotion behind it all made the tribute hit completely different. Solange wrote, "Rest in peace, Hayden. In peace, because you are so deserving of it. We had so many parallels in our lives, and the world watched you so courageously live in your radical truth, telling your story. But she didn't stop there," she continued. "We watched your endless quest for vulnerability and healing. I salute your journey, and I honor the work we created together that became something that really means something to people, reaching people we couldn't have ever imagined at the time, as 2 young girls trying to keep looking to the light." Those words had people looking back at their connection with fresh eyes, because Solange clearly put serious emotion into every line. "The light surrounds you now. Rest easy, Hayden." To a casual reader, that sounds like a touching message between 2 former co-stars who worked together on Bring It On, All or Nothing back in 2006. But online, some people started reading much deeper into Solange's words. They felt the message wasn't simply a tribute, and began questioning whether she was hinting at the darker side of the entertainment business and what can allegedly happen behind closed doors.
I worked so hard to create this incredible life and career, and I burnt it all to the ground. Don't believe what you see in a picture. There's so much more going on, so much more. For the first time, I was able to put into words what has been going on for the past.
So what exactly did people think Solange was trying to communicate about Hayden's passing? That's where this whole situation gets seriously complicated. News emerged on August 16th that Hayden Panettiere had passed away, and almost immediately, people began connecting it to comments she had reportedly made only 3 months earlier during an appearance on Jay Shetty's podcast. During that conversation, Hayden described trusting a friend who allegedly brought her into a room with an extremely famous man. Hayden didn't name the person, so we're not going to pin that claim on anyone without evidence. But according to her story, this powerful celebrity allegedly wanted her to get involved with something connected to yachting, a term that has sparked plenty of discussion online about the private world surrounding wealthy and famous people. And that wasn't the only heavy subject Hayden reportedly discussed. She also opened up about difficult experiences surrounding Hollywood, which made those older comments suddenly get a whole new wave of attention after news of her passing. Then came another detail that had people talking. Reports surrounding the situation said first responders found Hayden unresponsive and experiencing cardiac arrest at a residence in Greenville, South Carolina. With her podcast comments still fresh in people's minds.
I was 19. I finally got up the courage to split from her as business-wise, because I desperately wanted a relationship with her, desperately wanted her to just be my mom. And so she came into my trailer during lunch when we were filming Heroes, and I said to her, I don't want us to work together anymore. I just want you to be my mom.
Viewers quickly started going back through old interviews, clips, and statements, trying to understand whether there was more context hiding beneath the surface. The Greenville Police Department and the Greenville County Coroner's Office reported that the initial autopsy showed no signs of physical trauma or suspicious circumstances. But that detail didn't stop the internet from asking questions. Whenever a celebrity passes after an apparent substance-related medical emergency, people start looking closely at the circumstances, especially when there's already a complicated history surrounding the people involved. That doesn't prove something happened behind the scenes, but it explains why this case immediately attracted so much attention. And one name quickly entered the conversation: Hayden's on and off boyfriend, Brian Hickerson, Official incident reports reportedly confirm that Hickerson and his brother Zach were at the South Carolina residence when emergency services responded to the 911 call. Hickerson was also reportedly the person who handed responding officers a bag containing medications. Again, that detail by itself doesn't establish wrongdoing, but people were paying attention because of the couple's troubled history. And that history is where things get especially heavy. Hickerson had a documented record involving domestic violence-related legal issues.
I also wasn't expecting the reaction that I got, which was, "You owe me." And that's all she said, and she walked out. And part of me was like, oh, I'm relieved that it was short, like ripped the Band-Aid off. But then it was like this dark looming cloud, over my head going, what does she mean by I owe?
Including a 2021 no contest plea, along with a 5-year protective order. Hayden also reportedly addressed painful experiences from their relationship in her memoir, This Is Me, A Reckoning. In the book, Hayden described one especially disturbing incident involving Hickerson, saying things became so physically rough that she stayed inside her home for weeks afterward. That kind of history naturally gave people more context when they heard who was reportedly present during the emergency response. It also explains why old reports about their relationship suddenly started resurfacing as viewers tried to piece together the timeline. Hayden wrote that she hesitated to report that incident to police because she was worried about the public finding out. And that detail became even more intense when reports about the people around her started circulating. There were also claims that Hayden had a private romantic connection with Brian Hickerson's brother, while both brothers were reportedly at the residence during her final medical emergency. Naturally, that complicated history had people asking some serious questions. Some viewers even started wondering whether there had been some kind of messy love triangle behind the scenes. But there isn't enough solid information to pin Hayden's passing on either man, so that theory needs to stay exactly where it belongs. Online speculation. What is documented, however, is the frustration Hayden's mother, Leslie Vogel, publicly expressed about Brian Hickerson being around her daughter. Her words were extremely emotional. She said, "This person in her life that we have been trying to get rid of for quite some time was with her at her and that was Brian Hickerson." I think Hayden was an amazingly talented person in so many departments, and I think young people who grow up in the entertainment industry, it is a struggle, and it's a very challenging industry.
Jim Murray tells us who it is.
We're learning disturbing new details about the tragic death of Hayden Panettiere. The just-released police incident report says a first responder was shown a bag of medications that Hayden is currently on. The list has been blacked out by cops, but it lists 9 separate. The report also says 2 men were present when Hayden died. They were identified as Hayden's 37-year-old boyfriend, Brian Hickerson, and his brother Zach, who's a preacher at a church he founded in South Carolina.
And it's not unusual for them to sadly find the wrong path. End quote. That statement definitely added another layer to an already complicated story. Hayden's mother made it clear that the family had reportedly wanted distance between Hayden and Brian for quite some time. At the same time, the mother-daughter relationship had its own history and struggles, so this wasn't exactly a simple family situation either. Once people started digging into that history, even more uncomfortable details from Hayden's past began resurfacing. Hayden actually fired her mother as her manager years earlier, reportedly hoping they could finally have a normal mother-daughter relationship instead of mixing family with business. But according to Hayden's own account, once that professional and financial connection disappeared, their relationship seriously fell apart. She described feeling abandoned in situations involving adults her mother barely knew, said her concerns about being treated badly weren't always taken seriously, and recalled feeling enormous pressure to keep working because her career was supporting more than just herself. That history is exactly why some people reacted so strongly when Hayden's mother later released a public statement. Critics online described the statement as unusually cold and formal, while others questioned whether focusing so heavily on Hayden's troubled relationship with Brian Hickerson ignored deeper problems that Hayden said went back much further. That doesn't automatically make her mother responsible for everything Hayden experienced, but it definitely explains why their complicated relationship became part of the conversation. Then there's what Hayden revealed about growing up inside Hollywood. She previously spoke about being given medication at around 15 years old before red carpet appearances because she struggled with anxiety and panic. Think about how young that is. Instead of simply asking how a teenager was coping with that level of pressure, Hayden's story raised uncomfortable questions about how young performers were managed behind the scenes. As she got older, Hayden also described struggling with substances and prescription medication.
The police officer who responded says, "I observed Zach to be very emotional while EMS were working on Hayden. Brian did not become emotional until EMS declared her officially deceased." Brian Hickerson served 45 days in jail for punching Hayden in the face in 2021. Despite what Hayden admitted was a toxic relationship, published reports said they had secretly rekindled their romance. They were staying together at an Airbnb, a spacious one-bedroom loft similar to this one in a luxury apartment complex in Greenville.
Saying those substances eventually became connected to simply getting through everyday life, rather than having fun. That part of her story is especially rough, because the problems didn't suddenly appear when she became an adult. And that brings up a much bigger question. Who was protecting a 15-year-old performer while all of this pressure was building? A teenager shouldn't have to chemically calm herself just to smile for cameras and survive another red carpet. Hayden's experience also makes people wonder how many other young stars were quietly pushed through similar situations, because keeping the Hollywood machine moving mattered more than asking whether the person at the center of it was actually okay. Hayden also opened up about what happened after she welcomed her daughter, Kaya, in 2014. She experienced severe postpartum depression, and then things became even more emotionally complicated. Her character on Nashville was given a storyline dealing with similar struggles, meaning Hayden had to show up for work and perform scenes that reportedly felt painfully close to what she was experiencing in her own life. Just imagine that pressure. You're already dealing with a serious mental health struggle away from the cameras, and then you arrive on set only to find similar emotions waiting for you in the script. Hayden later spoke about how difficult that overlap became, and it raised uncomfortable questions about whether enough care was being given to her well-being while the production continued moving forward. And then there was the situation involving her daughter. Hayden said Kaya went to live in Ukraine with her father, while Hayden focused on recovery. But according to Hayden, the custody arrangement wasn't something she viewed as a simple or casual decision. She said she signed over full custody during an extremely vulnerable period, while believing the situation would eventually change. That's heavy. Trying to rebuild your health while also being separated from your child can create an entirely different level of emotional pressure. Hayden's story left people questioning whether she received enough support.
Reportedly told it would be bad for sales if it was known she was still with Hickerson while she was promoting her book about her turbulent life. This was the extraordinary scene when Hayden and Hickerson were caught in a melee outside a hotel on Sunset Strip. It began inside a nearby bar, and she can be heard warning Hickerson he could end up back in jail.
Brian, jail!
In an interview with Tamron Hall in May, Hayden remained strangely silent while her friend Casey Kitchen spoke about Hickerson.
It wasn't just physical, it was manipulative. The psychological abuse that she was enduring. And he seemed very charming at first.
During a period when she was actively trying to get her life back on track. Her health struggles eventually became frighteningly serious as well. Hayden described reaching a major medical crisis around age 28, saying her body was sending clear warning signs that something had to change immediately. She recalled her eyes turning yellow and experiencing serious liver problems, with doctors warning that continuing down the same road could cause permanent damage. At that point, this wasn't Hollywood partying or celebrity drama anymore. It had become a serious fight to regain control of her health. Even after getting sober and then facing the heartbreaking loss of her brother Jansen in 2023, Hayden kept moving forward. She was rebuilding different parts of her life, talking openly about her past, and trying to tell her story in her own words. That's exactly why, after her passing, some people online started looking back at everything she had recently discussed and wondering whether she had been revealing uncomfortable details about the entertainment industry. Some theories went much further, suggesting that Hayden had been saying too much about powerful people and that somebody wanted her quiet. There's no solid basis to accuse anyone of secretly causing her passing, but the speculation became part of the online conversation almost immediately, and that takes us straight back to Solange's tribute, and one particular word that caught everyone's attention: parallels. To understand why that word stood out, people looked back at the period when Solange and Hayden worked together on Bring It On, All or Nothing, Both were young women navigating an entertainment business largely controlled by older executives and industry professionals. Years later, Hayden described one particularly disturbing part of growing up in that environment. In her memoir and interviews, Hayden said that when she was only 15,
in fact, when Hayden appeared on the show, they were already back together. Hickerson was spotted with Hayden at Los Angeles International Airport in March when she had been struggling to get around on crutches. She explained that she was suffering from excruciating back pain.
Just have some pinched nerves in my lower back.
Did the pain drive her to use the same kind of powerful painkillers she was once addicted to? Meanwhile, former boxer Vladimir Klitschko, father of Hayden's 11-year-old daughter, posted a touching tribute to Hayden. Nothing will erase the times we shared or the place she had in our lives.
someone connected to her team gave her medication before red carpet appearances so she could stay energized, calm, and camera-ready. According to Hayden, that experience became connected to a much longer struggle with dependency. And when you hear that story, the glamorous Hollywood image suddenly looks a whole lot less glamorous. Solange knew Hayden during that broader period of her life, although that doesn't mean she personally witnessed everything Hayden later described. Solange also grew up inside the entertainment business, alongside her sister Beyoncé, and eventually became known for protecting her creative independence and discussing pressures within the industry. So when Solange wrote, "We watched you so courageously live in your radical truth," fans immediately started connecting those words to Hayden, becoming increasingly open about her experiences. To them, it sounded like recognition of Hayden finally speaking for herself, discussing former managers and difficult experiences, and refusing to let the most painful chapters of her Hollywood story simply disappear. Then there's another line from Solange that really grabbed people. "Rest in peace because you are so deserving of it." Why put so much emphasis on Hayden deserving peace? Fans interpreted that wording as Solange recognizing just how difficult Hayden's life had become, especially after years of intense industry pressure, public scrutiny, personal struggles, and painful situations that followed her far beyond the cameras. Solange then closed with another emotional line, "Two young girls trying to keep looking to the light. The light surrounds you now." That wording immediately sparked discussion. Some viewers interpreted looking to the light as a metaphor for trying to protect yourself and stay grounded while navigating a business that can become extremely demanding. It doesn't automatically mean there was some secret Hollywood code, but in the context of everything Hayden had shared, people understood why those words felt especially powerful. Solange herself has often taken a more independent path, creating distance from parts of mainstream celebrity culture while protecting her artistic direction and personal space. Fans saw a possible parallel with Hayden's own attempts to regain control of her life. Hayden faced relentless media attention, complicated custody issues, health struggles, and years of emotional pressure.
Hayden Panettiere has died today, just 3 months after exposing a disturbing experience involving Hollywood's hidden rules. Earlier this year, Hayden revealed what happened to her when she was only 18, and her career was becoming more successful. She said she was on a boat when a woman she deeply trusted and saw as a protector took her downstairs into a small room. The woman then physically put Hayden into a bed next to an undressed man. Hayden described him only as a very famous man and never revealed his identity. Hayden immediately realized something was wrong. She refused to stay, ran out of the room, and hid somewhere on the boat. Because they were out at sea, she had no simple way to leave.
Making Solange's reference to two young girls looking to the light hit even harder. And once you look at Hayden's story through that lens, another detail starts to stand out. She had reached a point where she seemed determined to control her own narrative. For years, different pieces of her life had been filtered through managers, tabloids, relationships, court documents, and people speaking about her from the outside. But later on, Hayden began speaking much more openly about what those years actually felt like from her perspective. She discussed the pressure of becoming famous so young, the difficult choices made around her career, her struggles with dependency, and the complicated relationships that followed her into adulthood. Instead of keeping everything polished and Hollywood-friendly, she was putting uncomfortable experiences into her own words. That matters because once a celebrity starts revisiting old stories publicly, people naturally begin comparing those accounts with what audiences were originally told. And this is where Solange's phrase, "telling your story," becomes especially interesting. She didn't simply praise Hayden's acting or talk about memories from their movie together. She specifically highlighted Hayden's courage in speaking about her life and her quest for vulnerability and healing. That wording makes the tribute feel deeply connected to the personal journey Hayden had been discussing publicly. There's also a major difference between saying somebody struggled.
3 months after she publicly shared that experience, Hayden has now died at only 36 years old. Her representative confirmed her death, but her cause of death has not been released. Reports also claim Hayden had recently left Los Angeles with her on-and-off boyfriend, Brian Hickerson. Police reportedly responded to an incident involving her shortly before her death, and an investigation remains open. The timing has quickly caused discussion online. Many people are now asking again who the famous man was and why Hayden never revealed his name.
And actually asking what created those struggles in the first place. Hayden's story repeatedly brought the focus back to what happens when someone enters an adult-controlled industry at an extremely young age and is expected to perform, smile, and keep working while dealing with pressures most teenagers would never face. And once people started revisiting Hayden's older interviews with that in mind, certain comments began hitting very differently, especially the moments where she described who she trusted, what happened behind closed doors, and how difficult it became to recognize which people around her genuinely had her best interests at heart. And trust became a huge part of Hayden's story. When she spoke about her past, one of the most unsettling themes wasn't simply the pressure of fame, it was how difficult it could be to know who was actually protecting her and who was benefiting from having access to her. When your career starts that young, the adults around you control the rooms you enter, the opportunities you receive, and sometimes even the information you're given. That's why her comments about being introduced to powerful people through someone she trusted caught so much attention. The bigger issue wasn't about guessing the identity of some mystery celebrity. It was the power imbalance Hayden was describing. A young performer could walk into a situation believing somebody had her back, only to realize that expectations had changed once the door closed. And Hayden wasn't the only former young star to later describe Hollywood as a place where professional boundaries could become seriously blurred. Her experiences fit into a much broader conversation about child performers growing up around adult money, adult pressure, and adult decisions before they're equipped to understand the long-term consequences.
But again, police are now saying that this is still an ongoing investigation. At this point, they are digging into surveillance, tracking any of her movements in the days leading up to her death. Surely they're going to be tracking the medications, where some might have come from, what were prescription, what were not. And that is definitely where this open investigation is going to take place. Now, Brian's attorney did share a statement on his behalf saying that Hayden remains under investigation and it is important to allow the investigation to proceed. As has been publicly reported, police confirmed there were no signs of foul play.
That makes Solange's reference to two young girls even more striking. She wasn't remembering two established celebrities sitting comfortably at the top. She was looking back at two young performers trying to navigate a massive industry while still figuring themselves out. They may have eventually taken very different paths, but both understood what it meant to have strangers analyzing their image, career, and personal choices. And there's one more piece of Solange's wording worth examining. She said their work eventually reached people we couldn't have ever imagined at the time. That sounds nostalgic on the surface, but paired with everything else in the tribute, it puts the spotlight back on who Hayden was before years of public struggles became attached to her name, and what those early years may have looked like when the cameras weren't rolling. And those years before everything became public are important, because Hollywood can sell audiences one version of a young star, while something completely different is happening in that person's private life. Hayden spent years being presented as the talented, confident actress who could handle the spotlight, but her later reflections painted a much more complicated picture of what carrying that image actually required. Think about the contrast. On camera, everything has to look clean. Premieres, interviews, photo shoots, smiling for photographers, answering the same questions over and over. Behind that polished image, Hayden described dealing with anxiety, overwhelming expectations, and adults making decisions that could affect the rest of her life. When that starts during your teenage years, fame isn't just something you experience. It can shape the way you understand trust, relationships, and even yourself. That's also why focusing only on Hayden's struggles as an adult misses a huge piece of the story. Her later difficulties didn't exist in some vacuum. Hayden herself repeatedly connected parts of her journey to experiences that started much earlier, when she was still growing up inside an industry where enormous amounts of money could depend on a young performer continuing to show up and deliver. And this brings another part of Solange's tribute into sharper focus. I honor the work we created together that became something that really means something to people.
Remember, I reported on a previous video, Wednesday around 8:30 a.m., police officers showed up at Brian and Zach's grandmother's home, just about 5 miles from that Judson Mill Lofts apartment. They were apparently there to do a welfare check. They showed up twice. Nothing came of that. It's also been reported that just 3 days before Hayden's death, the judge had denied Brian Hickerson's request to drop the felony charges that were tied to a case between him and Hayden previously.
There's something powerful about separating Hayden the person from the headlines that eventually surrounded her. Solange was taking people back to a time when these two young women were simply creating something together, long before audiences knew how complicated Hayden's life would become. But revisiting that period also raises a tougher question. If Hayden was already dealing with serious pressure while appearing successful to everyone watching, how much did the people working closest to her actually know? Because once you start examining who had influence over young performers during those years, the story moves beyond celebrity gossip and into the system surrounding them. So, were there actually any suspicious circumstances in the legal sense? And is that what Solange was trying to suggest? Solange never directly said that, but for fans who have been analyzing every line of her tribute, the bigger question is whether Hayden was failed by the people and systems surrounding her long before her final medical emergency. During her later years, Hayden became increasingly open about her experiences, including uncomfortable situations she said she encountered while navigating fame and powerful industry circles. She was finally telling parts of her story in her own voice. And when you put those revelations beside Solange's emotional words about radical truth, healing, and two young girls looking to the light, it's easy to understand why the tribute struck such a nerve. Maybe there's no hidden message at all. Maybe Solange was simply honoring somebody she knew, worked with, and watched struggle through an incredibly complicated life. But her words also leave us thinking about a much bigger issue. What happens when young performers enter an industry built around money, image, and constant pressure before they're old enough to understand what that world can demand from them? So what did you hear in Solange's tribute? A deeper message? Or simply one friend saying goodbye? Drop your take in the comments. And if you enjoyed this breakdown, like the video, subscribe to the channel, share it with someone who needs to see it, and I'll catch you in the next one.